Okay, it's the end of the year. Hopefully, this is hooked up. This is sort of an impromptu decision. I wasn't intending, really, didn't need to make a video here. Got more important things to do, like most of us here today. But, uh, someone reached out to me and said that I think it's important that you at least do a short recap video of just all the crazy things that happened this year. And as I got to looking at it, really, the funny thing is that I've only really been on YouTube for a year, and of all years, that was 2020. It's hard to believe. So I just want to take a look, a recap at just the craziness that has occurred here just this past year. So this is a live video. I probably won't get to any comments until at the end. And I enjoy doing the live videos, and is used to. I have a lot of time in the courtroom speaking to juries, speaking to judges, but I really enjoy speaking to juries. And the crazy thing is ever since I did my first live video on YouTube, it is so much more difficult than it looks. At the time that you're talking, you don't even think about saying or and or just the little things that if you're watching someone else talk on a live video, if you're talking about the radio, you don't notice it until you listen back to it. And this just also happens to be the first year that I did all these radio interviews. And I was on TV multiple times here this year. So I've really been put through my paces, unfortunately not in the courtroom as in years past, because the courtrooms were closed for much of the year. But on these live videos on YouTube, on the radio stations, on TV stations, talking about just some of the crazy stuff that happened this year. So the first and biggest thing that I learned is really it's not that when you see the guys on TV or you hear the guys on the radio, it sounds so much easier than it actually is. It's actually much more difficult, in my opinion, than actual public speaking, which I'm good at. I can get in front of a group of people or a jury, and the words flow much, much better than just sitting by yourself behind a microphone. It's not that easy. But this all sort of kicked off at the same time when I uploaded my first YouTube video, which a lot of people saw, and that was the creepy search case where the police basically performed a home invasion in Putnam County, West Virginia. And this video was nowhere else until I uploaded it onto YouTube. And the funny thing is I tried to get law enforcement to do something about it first, but before I uploaded it to YouTube. But that's where I ended up putting it because I had nowhere else for it to go. Happy New Year to you as well, Mike. And Jason, thanks for joining me. And Mike, I'll try to get to some comments, but I just want to go over some of these videos and just look at a recap at some of the wild stuff that's happened. Let me share. This is my page here in reverse order, so the oldest are first. And here it is, almost a year ago to the day, 11 months ago. This is that creepy search
Wouldn't
video.
It be better
and I wonder if I'll get credit for ads
with limited
that
carry
are actually,
options. Responsible gun
being
owners know
amplified
the
right now.
frustration.
So let's skip the ad. But here is the first video that I uploaded. And I get asked all the time, what's the update on this case? What's the update on this case? Well, I'll be doing an update on this case, hopefully, very soon. But this is what happened August 21st of 2019. You had police officers that was basically this drug task force unit that came to my client's house. And they really were there, as far as we know, for no other reason than to serve a summons for a civil eviction case, which ended up being settled after the fact. But here's what happened when they actually showed up. So the police officers, this drug task force unit, had decided they were going to have a look around my client's property, and he had security cameras up. He had some outside and he had some inside, and those were hidden. So here's the camera that's on the outside. This is the one that survived. You can see the cars pulling in, and the officers didn't know that camera was there, and they didn't know the cameras inside were there. So his cameras caught them after having climbed in through his window, just basically like a common burglary. and they're looking around inside his home with his flashlights. Now, this is a rented home, but he still was in possession of the unit at this time. And he had cameras on the inside of his house, not because he was a drug dealer or anything like that, but because he rather innocently had a really nice arrowhead collection and was afraid that someone would try to steal his arrowheads. But little did he think that it would actually be police that broke into his house. And this is just I thought was a really creepy video. And it shows these are cops. They don't look like cops. You can see the pistols kind of just tucked into the front of the pants. Got the tattoos and they have the grunt style shirts, and there's no warrant. There's no warrant. They just climbed in the window, and they're looking around. And this is a drug unit. I mean, presumably they're looking for drugs. But look at this. This guy actually over here, he grabs a container that has some sort of unknown substance to him. And you know what it is? It's the ashes of my client's friend. And he had a premature death, and his family gave a bit of his ashes to his best friend, who was my client, and he had it in his room. Well, this guy grabs it, and he starts shaking it somewhere right here. Here he is. So he's got the ashes of the dead friend in the container. He's shaking it around. He thinks it's drugs, presumably. And what he's going to do is he's going to go run a field drug test. And he ran through two field drug test kits and put the discarded ashes in the drug test kits. And they tested negative, obviously. And then he just threw them on the ground. But he thought the ashes were drugs. And if you look back at that, you can see little bits of this guy's bone inside the drug test kits. I mean, it's just, and again, there's no warrant here. There was no paperwork at all. And they didn't know these cameras were filming. See, the outside camera that they saw, they actually cut the wire. So they thought that they were in the clear here. And another creepy thing that they did in the house is they pulled out all his guns. You see, he's got an AR there. He's got a bolt action hunting rifle. They pull out all his guns from the closet, and they take pictures of them. And they left them there just out for him to find when he came home. I mean, can you imagine that? You get home and all your guns, your ARs, whatever you have is pulled out and it's sitting on your stove like somebody had been playing with it and photographing it. And again, no search warrant, no paperwork, no inventory, nothing. And this isn't all the video. In fact, we gave all of this video to the internal investigators for this department, Putnam County, West Virginia Sheriff's Department. We shared the original videos with them. I brought my client and any other witnesses to speak with them for their internal investigation. And really the only update, if you want to know, is as far as I know, they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. So as usual, the only person to do anything is going to be me or someone like me, a civil rights lawyer, to file civil rights lawsuits in federal court, Section 1983 cases, and try to get money damages. It's not perfect, but it's what's available to us. I can't get police officers fired. I can't put them in prison. I'm not a prosecutor. All I can do is file civil lawsuits and try to get awards of money damages. And so that's the creepy search video. And I ended up having if you saw it back when it first came out, there was a little more to the end because there's a camera of the outside that they missed. And you can see one of these guys right there. He's the only one in uniform. Now, he's not really in uniform. He's just in like a tactical getup and it says sheriff. So that's the outside camera that they didn't notice. Well, actually, that is the one. This is the camera. I learned later after I made this video, I was mistaken. This is the camera that was cut. They cut the wires shortly after you see this guy get to the end of the bridge. I showed it in an update video. By the time he gets to the end of the bridge, that's when another police officer cuts the wire on this thing and it shuts off right then and there. But it was the one in the front. This is the one they missed. And you can see the vehicles coming and you can see the vehicles going. So that is really the first video I posted, and it sort of kind of people went wild over it, especially in West Virginia, and it went sort of viral. And I that's really when I first realized the power of YouTube, because you can't force your public officials to do anything, and in fact you can't get them to do a lot of things. But the best thing that even as a lawyer that I can do is just shine light on what's happening, to shine a light on what these police officers were doing, so that they can see for themselves. Because again, couldn't get law enforcement to do it. We shared it with them at every level, and they just weren't interested in it for whatever reason. But the people are upset when they see things like this, and there's no good excuse for that. Now, in some blog post, I discussed what I think their excuse is going to be, and I think they're going to say, "Well, the landlord gave us permission," because they, after the fact, once they got caught, they said they were there to serve a eviction notice and something. So it wasn't an eviction order; it was just the paperwork that the landlord first fills out when he hadn't been paid, and it has to get served, and you have the right to respond to it and go to court. So there was no eviction order; it was just the service of process. And so, were they working for this landlord? Were they doing this on other properties? I don't know. But if they do say that the landlord gave them permission, there's actually I think it's 1958 or 59 or 1960 U.S. Supreme Court case that says exactly that a landlord cannot give law enforcement permission to enter a leased premises without the tenants permission, without their consent. So that is literally not allowed, hasn't been allowed for the past 60 years, 70 years. So that was that case. The next real thing that happened, and I didn't know it was going to be such a crazy year when I first filed that case, but I guess it was a preview of coming attractions. I should have known. The next real thing that kind of came down the pike that I was talking about was the impeachment. So the impeachment happened, and I'm looking back at history, and I enjoy history. So I'm looking at the impeachment stuff. And so I did a video on that. And that was one of the kind of the first videos I did where I'm discussing constitutional law. And here's this video. It happened twice before to presidents. So we only have two other cases to look at. The first is Andrew Johnson just after the Civil War. And it really has nothing to do with what's going on today. Is the audio all right on that? It's hard for me to tell. Really, we can get out of it. 1998 is pretty close. And there actually was a trial in the Senate, articles of impeachment, and all that. So we can look at what happened there, what the law was argued to be there, and apply it to 2019. So you can see, go back and watch the video if you're interested in the impeachment. I know it's old news now. They're extremely, but I went back and researched the law, political institutions, or really not the law, but the history carried forward. They warned on what happened in the past. What is the law on impeachment of a president of the United States? Because most of the impeachments have been federal judges or things of that nature. Really, we've only had it a couple times where it's been brought up where a president of the United States has been impeached. So I went through, I think it was what was it, Andrew Johnson, and then I went through Bill Clinton and made a lot of the comparisons where things just didn't line up. They'll leave the presidency permanently disfigured and diminished, and at the mercy as never before at the caprices of Congress. So really the nation's historians, who probably were college professors, I'm guessing, and probably had nothing to do with their political bias, their prejudices, 400 of them came forward to support President Clinton and warn that this has never happened before, and that if it happened, it would be. Yeah, hopefully you can hear that. But what I'm saying here is the thing that really surprised me when I got into researching this whole impeachment BS was when Clinton was impeached, there were 400 college professors that came forward and submitted comments to Congress and gave testimony before Congress about how this is totally inappropriate, that impeachment for a sitting president is only for the gravest of concerns when there's really no other choice. And yet you look at those same hypocrites when it came to the non-issue of trying to impeach President Trump for something that anyone and everyone that's objective concluded didn't happen at all. I mean, it was total hypocrisy. And who loses? It's the people lose. We lose because it's our Constitution, our really the only thing that we're guided by that's being denigrated here. And if we're not going to follow it in the 2020 impeachment, then it's not going to be any good to us in any subsequent impeachment. So check out that video if you hadn't. But that was, before really things got crazy in 2020, was the impeachment stuff. So what came next? The next interesting video that I had posted was this AR open carry case, the Michael Walker case. And this had actually happened back in February 21st of 2017, but we were litigating the case. So my client suffered from epilepsy. He didn't have a driver's license. He had to walk everywhere he went. West Virginia is an open carry state. He liked to hunt. He was going coyote hunting. AR-15s are great for coyote hunting, and you also do it at night. So he's walking along the side of the road to his friend with his backpack even on top of that, pointed in a safe direction. It wasn't even in his hands. There was a Karen who called 911, and 2 Putnam County deputies, including this one Deputy Friendly here, who's just appears to be a super nice guy. They encountered Michael walking, and he had a feeling they were going to harass him because they had already harassed him once before. And so instead of just putting up with it, he had some questions for him when they arrived. And you can see the blue lights now.
Up to it, buddies.
They say, "Where are you going?"
Back up. Got some ID on you?
Huh?
Got some ID on you?
Have I broken any laws?
I'm asking you if you got any ID on you.
Have I broken any laws?
I'm asking you one time.
So they're asking for his ID, and he's asking, "Have I broken any laws?"
Can you tell me what crime I've committed?
Because I'm asking you for ID. I have the right, absolute right, to ask anybody who they are and if they have any ID.
Unless
you do not have to break a law for me to ask you who you are. Right or wrong?
Wrong. Unless I have committed a crime.
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
No, sir. You want to do this or not?
Sir, I'm just trying to get up to my destination.
Listen to me. Where's your destination?
You don't need to know that.
Well, you need to give me some ID.
All right, so I'm not gonna play the whole thing. You can watch it for yourself, but here's the best part of it somewhere. I mean, they're just harassing this poor guy, trying to get his ID to run a background check on him when the issue is reasonable suspicion. That's why he's asking, what crime have I committed? Because if you're not suspected of having committed any crime, then you can't be detained to have your background check run. And that's what he's doing. Since he's in possession of a firearm, although it's legal to open carry a firearm in West Virginia, and although he doesn't know who he is, so he doesn't have any information that would lead him to believe that he's not allowed to carry a firearm, including an AR, you can open carry. The allegation is that it is a Fourth Amendment violation because he's being detained without any reasonable suspicion, which is the constitutional requirement. So Michael pushes, he flexes his rights here, and this is what happens.
Then why am I getting stopped?
He ends up getting just called names.
That's up to
it's here somewhere.
Suspected of not being legal to carry a firearm.
Listen to me. Have you ever committed any crime that was...
Did you want me to check history on?
Yes.
Past 20
Yeah. Criminal history.
And you can see here I'm citing the law from United States versus Black, which says in black and white that carrying a gun in an open carry state cannot form the basis for an investigative detention without some additional facts that some crime is being committed or suspected of being committed. But here, this officer didn't know who he was. There was no allegation that he had committed any crime, so it fell squarely within the holding of United States versus Black.
Okay? Everybody in the world that I deal with that has a gun, I check and see whether they have committed a crime
And he's explaining how he violates the holding of United States versus Black all the time.
Okay. It'll only take a minute.
So
If you have not, you're kicked down the road. You can go do whatever you want to do. Okay. As for taking that in any store, if you plan on going to any store, I would highly advise against it.
I have done it several times.
I'm telling
Walking
you,
is my only transportation.
that's fine.
I have walked into many stores with this
That
firearm.
is why do you need to carry an AR-15 with you?
I don't answer questions.
Why do you need to carry an AR-15 with you? None of your damn business. How about that? He was going quite coyote hunting.
7 Valley Road and Scott Depot. Is that correct?
I don't answer questions.
Jesus Christ.
Here's the part. Here's what his government thinks of him.
But you got a Colt.
I don't answer questions. Don't touch me or my property.
Looking, I'm just seeing what kind
Don't
of gun
touch
you
me
got,
or
brother.
my property.
You know what? I understand the whole sovereign citizen bullshit. Okay?
He's not a
And I
sovereign
have it up to
citizen.
here with this. I don't have to answer any fucking questions or whatnot. You make it more fucking difficult for anybody to do their damn job out here. I'm just wondering what you have. I'm not going to take it from you at this
It
point.
doesn't matter what I
It-
have. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm not committing
Listen
any
to me.
crime.
I like guns too. I'm just kind of curious what you like to carry. I'm making small talk. Okay? You can do this bullshit all you want. And I fucking can't stand cocksuckers that do this kind of shit that make it more difficult. I don't have to answer questions. You know what? That's all I hear all goddamn day.
That's not my fault, sir.
It is your fault.
No, it's not.
Because you cocksuckers start it. I ask you for ID. When a law enforcement officer asks you for ID, it's not, I don't have to provide it. It's, here it is, sir, because by law, you fucking got to give it when you are asked for it. And if you think you don't press the issue, we'll find out. I'll hook you, book you, jam you in the jail. Then you can answer to a goddamn judge.
I have already.
I'll hook you, book you, throw you in the jail, and then you can answer to a goddamn judge. So that's what they thought of Michael Walker, who they didn't know from Adam. And that particular deputy, believe it or not, didn't receive any sort of discipline for what happened here. And not only the stop that had occurred, but the way he treated him. I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? There was no apology. There was no discipline. There was no write-up. Hell, I once had to litigate with a West Virginia state trooper who got a write-up for sneaking milk when he was in the academy. This guy, I mean, he called a citizen who had committed no crime a cocksucker. I mean, who wouldn't get fired for that at their job, at any other job? And that's one of the things we've learned in 2020 is that, us peasants, we're the non-essential ones. We're the non-essential workers. Who are the essential workers? That's all the damn government employees. Has a single one gotten laid off after the economy was closed and locked down? Did a single one lose $1 of their salary? No. In fact, I think the public would be shocked at how difficult it is for these law enforcement agencies to even fire these police officers if they want to. Do you know that? Do you know that they almost cannot even fire police officers? Because we have allowed public employees through unions and just through the swamp and bureaucracy to protect their jobs to the extent, it's not just police officers, but to protect their jobs to the extent that you just can't get rid of them. And we've seen it with the federal government. We've seen it with local governments and state government. I mean, that is the defining factor of public employment, is that you can do a crappy job and they can't fire you. They can't get rid of you when you're supposed to be working on behalf of the citizens. But you answer to nobody. The only thing they can ever fire these cops for is allegations or any of these public employees. What's the one thing that gets them fired? The only thing that gets them fired is allegations of sexual misconduct, the Me Too stuff. That's it. That's the only thing that can get them fired. And in fact, I've talked to the head dude at some of these law enforcement agencies who've told me just privately, look, we'd love to fire this person. I'm not talking about this guy either. I've had no conversation with the sheriff of that county. But I'd like to fire this person. We tried to fire this person. We couldn't do it. There are so many protections in place, and that is the real scandal. I hope that the biggest thing about 2020 is that people have realized that how fragile our constitutional protections are and how fragile our livings are, our private employment. While these public sector agencies, these public employees, they can do no harm. They can't get fired if they want to. So that was the AR open carry, sucker case. And believe it or not, that's still going on. That currently right now is sitting at the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Because believe it or not, the federal court ruled against us and ruled in that officer's favor that, and here's how he wiggled out of this. You can hear him on this video recite the law incorrectly over and over and over again. Well, you better, when a law enforcement officer asks you to show you ID, you better give it or you're going to get stuffed in jail. He's absolutely wrong. What did his lawyers have to argue? Oh, well, it's an objective standard. So even if the police officer is full of crap, he doesn't know the law, like this guy didn't know the law, that doesn't matter because it's an objective standard, not a subjective standard. So it doesn't matter if he misunderstood the law, so long as an objective police officer, objectively reasonable police officer would know the law. So what did they argue? What did his lawyers argue? That my client, Michael, may have been a mass murderer because he was headed in the direction of a school, which was about a mile down the road. That because he had the tool of mass murder, evil weapons, the AR-15, the evil black rifle, because he had that, any police officer would be reasonable in assuming that since he's headed in the direction of a school, that he might be headed to just murder a bunch of innocent children. And in reality, if you watch the video, there was no suspicion of that. That wasn't mentioned. In fact, when I took this officer's deposition later, I asked him, well, once Michael started walking on down the road, did you follow him to see if he was headed towards a school to commit mass murder? No, I went and did something else. Did you ask your partner or someone else to go check on the poor innocent school kids a mile down the road? No, I didn't. It absolutely had nothing to do with it. It was made up by lawyers after the fact. But that was enough to get the federal court to rule against us that, well, because AR-15s are the weapon, they're a weapon of war that aren't meant for hunting, which is absurd, that aren't meant for hunting and aren't used for hunting in West Virginia, which is completely false, that it would be reasonable to assume that he may about to be commit mass murder and therefore he can be stopped and ID'd. And that was the ruling. And it's clearly completely against United States versus Black 2013 from the Fourth Circuit. So that's why we appealed it to the Fourth Circuit, and it's there now. So I really hope that we win that case, and that's where it is right now. But that is a Michael Walker case, and that's, I'm really, really interested to see what happens. I mean, I really hope we don't lose that case, but it's still out there. Here's another interesting case we had this year. Here is let's see, skip through the ads here. All right, we had the prison guard or the correctional officer who made a traffic stop case. All right, one of my intros I've done. All right, so January, this is one of the first things that happened this year is my client's driving to his job. A black Audi pulls up next to him. and motions for him to pull over. It's just a guy in an Audi. He appears to have some sort of badge or something, but he's not in uniform. And it kind of turns into like a high-speed chase. He's afraid. He's basically trying to run away and get to his job as quickly as possible. And this is what happens when they get there.
Okay, here's what's going on here. See the guy standing up? That's who jumped out of that black Audi SUV. He's holding the other guy in the red SUV at gunpoint and orders him out of the car. That's Sean Warner, my client. The guy in the black shirt looks like jeans. He's got his pistol out and he's got a badge. He says he's a cop and he instructs him to walk over by his Audi, and he has him place his hands on the hood. And so he does. At that point, the guy from the black.
All right. So I don't know how well you can hear the audio here because it's confusing on this end of things. But all right, here we have this Audi SUV. Obviously, that's not a cop car. That's not your usual unmarked cop car either. And this basically followed my client, who was in the other car in the red SUV, and ordered him out of his car. He had been chasing him down the 4-lane, ordered him out of his car. This was in Doddridge County, West Virginia, at gunpoint, puts him in handcuffs, and then searches his car, asking him if he has any drugs, which he doesn't. And all these other employees these are all oil field workers. I mean, they're starting to gather around. And I think this guy would have had his ass kicked pretty quickly, but they weren't sure whether or not he was a cop because he had some sort of badge hanging on him and he had a gun. So you can hear him in the background of this video where they're saying, I don't know, I think he's a cop, but they're filming it.
Black Audi holsters his pistol and he gets out his handcuffs and he places the guy from the red SUV who was showing up to work there that day. His name's Sean Warner. He's placing him in handcuffs. And all these guys are standing around. These are all oil field workers, and there's like 15 or 20 guys. These are his co-workers. They were the guy in the black Audi.
I was kind of learning as I went with making these videos. I was never really trying to make them look super professional. I mean, didn't have a whole lot of time to do it. But so I've played around with different ways of making these videos, and then
some under arrest.
A lot of people have told me stop talking over the video. But so at some point I started breaking it up into clips. But you know, like I said, it's more difficult than it looks. It's a work in progress.
And you'll see that later with this car, you can see they're going over there.
He's using handcuffs there. So, and there's a woman in the car too. The guy's got his girlfriend in the car. I think it was his girlfriend. Anyways, he doesn't find any drugs in the car. He apparently thought he'd find drugs. He didn't find any drugs.
These guys talking about
the
guy from
apparently
the Audi
he's realized that he's screwed up, but even more so, the problem is that he's not really a cop. So after eventually he lets him out of the handcuffs, and then he gives him his card,
and he never identified who he was to harass you.
He's
not actually of West Virginia to do what he did.
All right,
but no one
he gives him his card at the end.
It
turns out he works for the Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation. He's not exactly a correctional officer per se, but he worked for the Division of Corrections. He was actually a probation/parole officer over in Parkersburg. But you know, he had made a traffic stop. Now, some correctional officers, such as the federal officers, some of them do carry a gun and they have limited arrest powers. But apparently this guy didn't. And soon as the folks at the DOC saw this, they started internal investigation, and me and my client went there to Charleston to the main headquarters, and they were very, very prompt with this. They were very diligent with it, and they undertook an investigation, and the guy was gone almost immediately. So the guy poof disappeared and is no longer working for them. And then what happened is I said, all right, we're going to make this, we're going to file a lawsuit. We got to get them some sort of compensation here. So we reached out to the DOC, and they had notified their insurance company. They got an insurance adjuster on it, and the insurance adjuster basically told me to go pound sand. And I said, well, come on, just put a lawyer on it anyways. Give me a lawyer to fight because I'm going to file a lawsuit here. And so finally, they put a lawyer on it. It's a defense lawyer who works in a lot of these types of cases. And she basically said, look, it sucks what happened to your client, but, look, if one of our employees goes and robs a bank, we're not going to be liable for that because it's a criminal act. It has nothing to do with their employment. And there's a good point there. So as it turns out, this wasn't an issued gun he has. He wasn't, he wasn't within his jurisdiction. He wasn't on duty. Didn't have any power to do this at all. And as far as they were concerned, it was just a criminal act. So, I did some legal gymnastics. I did my homework, and I found a theoretical good faith case that we would be able to make that, based on supervision and training, things of that nature. And so finally, we were able to squeeze a settlement out of them in that case. And that was the prison guard gone wild case. And 2020 wasn't done yet. What else happened here? I did a couple update videos, but the next real big video on its own that I had uploaded to YouTube, which is still going on and which I just did a video on this week, was the family court judge video out of Raleigh County, West Virginia. And this one really took off, like the other ones hadn't. And really because it was just such an unusual case, just such a bizarre case. So let me put this one up. So I was sort of into the the A&E intervention black background and white words era of my 2020 YouTube career. But here's a video. That's my client Matt Gibson standing in his driveway
Right now.
And he's waiting for the family court judge from his year-old divorce case to show up, and she's about to search his house. And I was pretty shocked when I saw this video. I'd never seen anything like it.
Laughing games, man. It's all laughs and fun for them.
Can we, hey guys, I need you off my property, please. Hey, you ain't allowed on my property. The only ones allowed right now is the judge and the deputy. Step off the property.
All right, that's the bailiff
Step off
for the
the property.
judge. They basically
Judge,
came
can I ask
straight
you
from the
something quick before we
courtroom.
get started? Judge.
And if you didn't watch the other video, they were divorced about a year earlier, and the ex-wife's lawyer filed a petition for contempt just out of the blue, stating that she didn't get all the items that it was agreed upon that she would get, such as DVDs, pictures, things of that nature. They haul him into court. He goes into court, and the judge says, all right, well, I'm going to go into your house and see if these items are there. I'll meet you at your house in 10 minutes. My client didn't even have a lawyer to object to this, wasn't given a chance to object. There was no court reporter there, but basically she was calling this a quote home visit. And he had the good idea to make a motion right there in his yard to have the judge recuse herself because she had made herself a witness, which she had.
Judge,
And that's what happens
can I
right
ask you
here.
something before we get started? Can you come here? I ain't trying to have everybody else listen.
Well, Mr. Luck is to listen.
That's good. I'm asking you right now, I'm putting in a motion to recuse yourself because you're putting yourself in a witness capacity instead of a...
All right, this is the judge right here. She's currently been, I'll get to that. I don't want to spoil it if you don't know. Here's the Raleigh County Sheriff's Department bailiff right here, deputy. And here is the lawyer for the ex-wife right here. And again, my client doesn't have a lawyer.
judiciary capacity. There's no search warrant. I need a list of everything that we're looking for.
You've got a list of everything that's worth for it's
Not
attached to
today.
the order.
Not today. I don't know where some of it's at.
Well, we're gonna
So,
find
you got it?
Your motion's denied. It's not
Where-
timely filed.
I need a search warrant. You won't get in my house without a search warrant.
Oh, yeah, I will.
All right. You won't get in my house without a search warrant. Oh, yes, I will. Now, this is just a bizarre set of facts. This had been happening for 20 years in this county, we later found out. And there is at least 10 or 11 other documented cases of this particular judge going inside litigants' houses, actually looking for things. And usually lawyers are involved on both sides who, for whatever reason, go along with this and don't object to it. But here my client doesn't even have a lawyer, so he's getting his Angus peppered, you could say. And it's not being recorded by a court reporter. He's got his girlfriend filming the video, and he's actually got a audio recorder in his pocket. But both of these things are forced to be turned off, even though he's on his own property. And this particular lawyer, I played it in the last video, he had threatened to have this done back while the divorce was going on in 2018. So there's my client right there, and they're checking out some kind of porch swing or something.
And on that order, ma'am, it says swing. These are two separate purchases.
You can't argue.
And so we still hear the audio from that's in his pocket.
Order's order.
But eventually he's forced to turn the audio off
Equitable distribution.
under threat of arrest, and he has to let him in his house.
My phone's not off.
And the ex-wife is brought into his house and allowed to take pictures, things that weren't even actually brought up at the original divorce. So had he not recorded that and had the balls to call her out in person to make a motion to disqualify her and demand a warrant, which your average person would not have the guts to do that, I guarantee you. Because he did that, she finally got called out on it. So 2020 is also the year of finally people realizing that there have been family court judges out of control. Pretty crazy. So that is a case that's going on now. What ended up happening is again, going back to the importance, ironically, of YouTube videos, or at least for now until they start censoring us. Even if your bureaucrats fail you, which they always do, and they don't protect your rights, they don't fire bad employees, they don't take any actions, the best thing that we can do is shine the light on it and expose what's happening to the public. And what happened after we posted that video? The next day after that video was uploaded, earlier this year, when was that? What was the date of that video? The very next day, the Judicial Investigation Commission in West Virginia, which is under the West Virginia Supreme Court, and it's the only body that's allowed and tasked with the jurisdiction to investigate and discipline judges in West Virginia, they saw the video and on their own started an investigation against this judge. And apparently we're on it the next day. And to make a long story short, they ended up filing a formal statement of charges against the judge. They can do. And the hearing is coming up on January 15th at 10:30 a.m. And anything could happen from her being removed from the bench to some sort of, written reprimand, or I suppose nothing. So it's not a criminal case. It's about the process of how a judge is disciplined or suspended or removed from the bench, and because they're elected in West Virginia. So the only other thing that could happen is the legislature could impeach them. And as we know, in 2020, the legislature hasn't been able to do anything because they haven't been in session most of the year. So that is the crazy but yet ongoing family court judge search case. But there have been, believe it or not, still more. I posted some other stuff, some other shenanigans, drone footage, and that's about the time that this lockdown stuff started. So really the first video, well, I did a video from the fort, and this was March 19th of 2020, just as this stuff is starting, this COVID tyranny. And none of us really knew exactly what was happening yet at this point.
1970 log fort.
But here I'm at my fort,
the coronavirus, at least for now.
and I'm discussing some updates in some of the cases. But that's our fort property right there. It's a log cabin. that it was a log cabin fort built in
in
1770 that we're restoring.
Of schools
It's one of the only still standing existing frontier Indian forts that's still in its original location.
Alabama National Guard,
And it's right here in
to
West Virginia.
protect the Civil Rights March was May 4th, 1970. You had 28 National Guard soldiers
So here,
who fired
everyone's
a
talking about
total of
martial law.
67
So I was bringing up
rounds
martial law.
over a
I was
period of
researching
13
martial law.
seconds, which ended up killing 4 students and wounding 9 others.
But I was a little
So
bit
that was
off in my what was actually going to happen. I was kind of missing the real issue. It wasn't martial law. It was the fact that these governors were going to just go out of control. And that's what ended up happening. So that was that sort of shifted to some new territory is, these a lot of it was just separation of powers. That we had the governors, especially our governor here in West Virginia, just overstepping what he's allowed to do. And so the first real video I did on that, I called it West Virginia's New Dictator. And that's when he first came out with a lot of his BS. And this is May 16th. And like a lot of people, when this first happened, I didn't know what was happening. They had me scared to death just like everybody. But, it took probably until, May 16th, where I realized that we had been duped, that I had been duped, and that we had to start to take a stand or else we were going to lose our country. So this is the first video that I did on the COVID tyranny. Here I'm standing in my garden at the fort.
The state capitol in Charleston, and for some essential business.
And I'm just sharing some of my thoughts about where I see this thing going. And I was remarkably accurate this time.
Some of the, I don't know if you want to call it a protest, but the get together that was at the state capitol.
I had gone to my first freedom protest. There's Mike Folk, who ran for governor of West Virginia.
There were some of our legislators speaking and just some regular people speaking. And, it really puts things into perspective, especially when we drive a couple hours back here to beautiful Monroe County and you hear the tractors working, you hear the farmers really hard at work, everything being planted. I'm planting my garden and just all this agricultural activity. And it reminds you that, for instance, on this property in the historic house here, we found all sorts of just records, farming records, going back to the 1800s, early 1800s in some cases. And they kept meticulous records. And the sad thing about it is nowadays the government has pretty much regulated these, regular farmers out of business. You cannot farm, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent.
All right. So I'm already starting to call out here a lot of what's happening with, all right, our eyes are opening. And I won't say my eyes because I've always been for smaller government. But a lot of people who just even aren't interested in politics, and I've got a degree in political science, so I've had a long-standing interest in politics. I don't know everything. And sometimes I go in and out of phases of paying attention to politics. But here, it's being shoved in our face, and we see the fact that, all right, the government has shut down the economy. And naturally, we should be able to, in a rural area like I live, we should be able to support ourselves just fine because, look around me. We've got cows out here. They're talking about a beef shortage, but we've got cows everywhere. But the reality of the situation is that thanks to all of our damn politicians and bureaucrats, the farmer next door can't butcher his cow and sell locally his meat. He can't do it because some swamp-dwelling bureaucrat urbanite from Northern Virginia or from New York or from New Jersey, or maybe he went to Duke, or maybe he went to one of the Ivy Leagues. He knows better than we do. In reality, he doesn't know a damn thing. You get them outside that beltway, they don't know anything. They don't know how to kill a deer. They don't know how to skin a deer. They barely know where their meat comes from. But yet they're telling us, these farmers who have farmed this land that I'm standing on right there since before the Declaration of Independence. So that garden right there has been farmed when Virginia was a colony of England. And yet some smarmy little autocrat in Northern Virginia or in DC is telling us that we're not smart enough or competent enough to be able to buy meat from a farmer that we know, because it's just too dangerous for us. And then you have the swamp creatures in the state of West Virginia and in every state who have implemented similar rules. And we're still not allowed to do it without the government's approval and without multiple six-figure positions for swamp creatures. And then this is going to be the story of 2020. It's going to be repeated over and over again. They shut down the barbershops and the hair salons. But do you think the inspectors who, for some reason, we need to inspect the barbershops, do you think that they were found to be non-essential and were furloughed? No, hell no. Even despite the fact that we don't need them. They've never saved one life. I guarantee you, they've never saved one life from a psychotic barber. And if there was a psychotic barber, they wouldn't be able to stop him anyways, because they're just giving dinky little fines for just stupid little stuff. If you really had an insane psychotic barber, they wouldn't catch him. So why do we have these people? Why do we pay them six figures? Hell, even in this little county that I'm standing in right there, we have a little county that's run by 3 county commissioners, and they have to pay this massive amount of salaries coming out of the public school system. And this is not just here. This is all over West Virginia and probably all over the country. So all these essential employees, they have to be paid continuously. And the county, even the county commission, they can't vote to furlough employees. They can't drop their salaries down. They have to pay what the state tells them that they have to pay, who are beholden to the teachers' unions. So out of our county taxpayer money, we're having to pay six-figure salaries to a half a dozen or more administrative assistants who make six figures. That's something you see in all these little counties, is that the unions and the public employees, they've entrenched themselves so deeply that you can't get rid of them. And the police officers, you can't get rid of them. You can't pay them less. And you don't have anything to say. Even your elected county commissioners can't do anything about it. This would be the story of 2020, in my opinion, is the year that we finally realized that we had let the fox into the hen house, and he'd been there for years, and now we can't get him out. And what do we do now? What can we do? So that was my real first video on my awakening as far as you know what, maybe we all should be libertarians, at least domestic policy wise. So that's West Virginia's new dictator. So it's one of my finer pieces of work from 2020, if I do may say so myself. But it got shortly after that video. It may have been during that video. I was approached by several members of the West Virginia legislature, and they told me that, look, we agree with you, and we haven't been involved in this. We have nothing to do with this. We're not in session, and the governor won't call us into session. And we're interested in trying to stop him. Would you represent us? So I said, hell yes. And so I ended up filing a lawsuit directly before the West Virginia Supreme Court, because why not? We have a state constitutional crisis, and that's where it should go, because that's where it's going to end up. Why waste time? Let's get it there as soon as possible. Let me get through this ad here. So here we had a press conference at the West Virginia State Capitol. And this is, when was this?
Doctrine of separation of powers. In the West Virginia Constitution, it states.
Well, I don't know where you see the date, but this was fairly early on.
Time of war.
So we had filed this lawsuit. There it is.
Right
and I'm,
now, that only
discussing it for the live Facebook crowd. And then there was a newspaper reporter there, a couple TV, And there's some of my clients who are legislators. I mean, they're just true patriots. That's Marshall Wilson. He ran for West Virginia governor as an independent, and he's a combat veteran and Army officer, father of 9 kids, and a former jungle missionary, just overqualified to be a politician. He was the lead plaintiff on the case, and he fought as hard as anybody could have fought, and even ran in the general election as an independent to try to defeat the tyrannical governor of West Virginia. So I mean, that man's just a true patriot, and I was glad to get to meet them. This is Tom Bibby, who's a delegate out of the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. I believe a retired Air Force officer and just a true patriot. And he's no longer a legislator. I believe it was his last year, because it's hard to keep good people. I've realized, but he was one of the plaintiffs in the case. And so this is just sort of a press conference that we did, and we had more interviews. And I am talking to the biggest newspaper in West Virginia. That's the Charleston Gazette, and he was really one of the few media entities that would give us any exposure on this fight, because there was a lot of suppression, just like. Another story of 2020 is what would happen is all this Facebook censorship. And the regular news media was suppressing everything, as they've always done. But Facebook here now, we're not even allowed to converse between ourselves without being fact-checked or banned or suppressed. But at least here we had at least a major newspaper that was willing to give us a fair write-up on what we were doing and why. There wasn't one positive case of COVID-19. So that's the state capitol, and that's the side door to get in there. And just after we had filed this case before the Supreme Court, as we're coming out the door there, who's coming in but the chief? I think he's the chief of staff, the head dude for the governor, comes in, and guess what? No mask. This isn't the height of all this stuff. No mask. And that just said everything. We held the door for him. And if I didn't know already, which I did, I certainly knew then that this is one of those things that they're telling the peasants to wear a mask when they themselves don't feel that it's necessary or helpful to wear a mask. So it's a little bit of a shaky video. There were some complaints at the production value of this video, but I have to defend its producer, because it was Little John. John Jr. was there with me, and he was actually patient enough to film this whole thing. But it's there to watch, and that is the press conference that we did on the lawsuit. Now, ultimately, we lost that case. The West Virginia Supreme Court denied it and did not even give us an explanation of why. Though there was one of the Supreme Court justices that went on a radio station and gave us basically great reviews for it, and said that it was very well written, and there was a lot of good points in it, but that the other justices basically just felt that there was a procedural defense to it, that they couldn't grant it under a writ of mandamus, which was the only way we could get it there, that it had to have come through a request for injunctive relief basically through the lower courts and then up there, which would have taken longer. But we're still doing that. So we raised some money through GoFundMe. Hundreds of different patriots donated to it, and we've been working on this lawsuit to do it the way that they wanted it done and get it right back there. And unfortunately, but fortunately, this stuff's still going on. So there's still time to do it, and we're going to take it there, and we're going to ask that this thing be decided before the Supreme Court for good. Tell us, why is this legal? How is this legal that a governor can create new laws? That a governor can create a new law having a military veteran, 70-year-old barber arrested for cutting 7 people's hair? How is it legal that you can shut down the Bridge Cafe and Bistro restaurant in Putnam County, West Virginia, just by virtue of executive edict? without any legislative input. And our legislators are the voice of the people. They're our representatives. Who are we to complain to if the governor won't let them be involved in the process? And they weren't, because there they are. There are your legislators, at least 5 of them right there. And they were fighting this all along because they were given no opportunity to be involved in the issues of, should there be a mask mandate in West Virginia? Should there be a lockdown? If so, if there's going to be these new laws, what are they going to be? What are the penalties going to be for them? That should have been something for our legislator. We were told that it was an emergency, that it had to be done now, right then and there. Had we been told from the beginning that it would be 9, 10, 11 months later, that all of this stuff would still be expanding and in place, the obvious answer would have been, well, no, we need a legislature. We need a special session of the legislature. And most states did have a special session. Even these states in the election litigation, like Pennsylvania, they had a special session of their legislature to deal with the COVID issues. Virginia had a special session of their legislature where they looked at they voted on things like, well, should it be illegal to violate the governor's mandates? If so, what are the penalties? Should the state of emergency be dropped? West Virginia, no such thing happened. It's just been one man making new laws and controlling anything and everything. In fact, shutting down the entire state's economy, and then taking upon himself to create a whole new plan of government and how the economy is going to reopen, called the comeback. And whatever your business is, you just log into our website. We tell you what all the new laws are. It's absolutely insane. 2019 me never would have ever believed that this could have happened. I would say it's too close to George Orwell. It's just over the top fiction. So that's really when I started getting into that this year. And then all the George Floyd stuff happened. So you had all the George Floyd stuff happen, and that sort of frustrated me. So I made a video on that, not on George Floyd, because that was discussed ad nauseum elsewhere. But I brought up light to the fact that I do this for a living, and it's not about systematic racism. It's not. Because believe me, it happens to white people, because that's mostly what we have in West Virginia. And I've got lots of white clients who have been everything from killed by the police to just harassed. It happens all the time. It's not about any sort of systematic racism. In fact, if it were, how do you account for places like Atlanta, where you have more than half of the police departments are black? How do you account for that? Or are they're racist black police officers? No, it's all this Antifa, the BLM stuff. It's just a red herring.
And even the brain surgeons were pressuring this
It's taking away from the actual struggle that's out there, which cuts across racial lines. I swear to you, it cuts across racial lines. It happens to people of every color. It happens to white people by black cops. It happens to vice versa. Is there racism involved in certain instances? Of course. There always will be.
No police
from every different direction. That's just human nature.
So, into the room with me.
I had sort of a frustrated, heartfelt discussion on the real issues of police misconduct. So you might want to watch that video if you're interested in that topic. But as far as solutions, here's what I proposed. What do I think is the problem? It's not that we need more wokeness in this country. We don't need statues taken down. We don't need our culture to be canceled. We need to actually address the problem, which has nothing to do with Marxist philosophy, has nothing to do with race baiting and race pimping. What does it have to do with? Well, it has to do with a total lack of accountability for police in this country. Not everywhere, but that certainly is systematic, because it's like that all over the country. Not everywhere, but it's pretty broad. We have a complete lack of accountability. That is something that could be addressed, but it's not sensational. It's not calling cops racist. It's an actual problem that actually exists that we could actually fix. All we have to do is do like we do with every other profession. What do we do with doctors? Doctors kill plenty of people. My father's a doctor. He's an orthopedic surgeon. Even he will tell you that everyone that has died that he knows had been to a doctor. So stay away from doctors. He's half joking when he says that, but only half joking, because doctors do make a lot of mistakes because they're human and they're dealing with life or death issues. So what do we do to make sure that we have less problems and it's more safe for us to get medical treatment? Is we have a system of discipline and accountability in every state in the country for doctors. We don't need it with the barbershops. We don't need it with most of the things that we have these bureaucracies for. But there are some things. Doctors, lawyers, judges, there are some things that we need to take extremely seriously and hold people accountable and investigate disciplinary complaints, investigate allegations of misconduct. We do it for lawyers. Believe me, we have to respond to every complaint that's filed against us, no matter how ridiculous or how stupid or even who makes it. Judges, the same thing, though theirs is, maybe lawyers are as well. It's confidential until it reaches a point. But why don't we have the same thing for police officers? We don't. There is no statewide in West Virginia. And again, I worked for the U.S. Department of Justice investigating pattern or practice police misconduct in all 50 states. I've looked at all 50 states to see what's happening in those states in the past as far as allegations of police misconduct, and then what are the real facts. And I've flown around the country to investigate those things. Okay. In West Virginia, where I've practiced for the past 15 years, practice law, civil rights law, police misconduct allegations, I can tell you that there is no statewide mechanism, no effective one anyways, for disciplining police officers. Generally, you have to complain to whatever agency committed the crime or committed the violation. So if it's the state police, you complain to the state police and they investigate themselves. Now, at least the state police, they do have a sort of internal review, unit. But for the amount of complaints, it's not as easy as it should be for them to get there. And there are less complaints about the state police. But you have all these every 55 county, there are agencies in all the 55 counties, little sheriff's departments, little police departments. Some of them only have 1 or 2 officers. And you have all sorts of issues. And so who are you going to complain to? They got 2 officers, they got 2 deputies and a sheriff. And so you complain to the sheriff, and he's only got 2 deputies, and he already doesn't, he pays them peanuts. So he's afraid to lose them. So they investigate themselves. And that's, without doubt, that's almost always how it works. Is law enforcement all over the country, but especially in West Virginia, they investigate themselves. We don't allow lawyers to do that. We don't allow doctors to do that. We don't allow judges to do that. But we allow police officers to do that. And why? That's fine if we want to do that. But then let's not complain about police misconduct and systematic problems with police if we're not willing to put some sort of system in place. How do we solve racial tension across the whole country? We can't do that. That's never going to be solved. Never going to be solved. All the George Floyd stuff, the Breonna Taylor stuff, that's never going to be solved. There's no politician that can take any action to solve what people are pissed off about there. It's not going to happen. But let's look at the real problem. We can fix that. If you want to defund the police, you want to fix the police, whatever. There are policy things that we can do. There are new laws that we can pass that we can fix that problem. We can have everyone have body cams. We can have independent review of all allegations of police misconduct. That would solve the problem right there. And then we already have the mechanism for civil lawsuits. Talk about social justice. That's what real social justice is. It's not about implementing leftist ideology and Marxism in our country. It's about making people whole for things that have happened to them. And so if the police violate your civil rights, even right now, since the late 1800s, we're allowed to sue them civilly in federal court, and they can be held financially responsible for violating our civil rights. Now that brings up other issues such as qualified immunity, but that's for another video. And that's another thing that we could do. All right. We can, qualified immunity. Where does that come from? Do you know that qualified immunity on the federal side is a creature of judicial legislation? The federal court, the Supreme Court, created qualified immunity. I think it was the Warren Court, Warren, the same court who produced Terry versus Ohio, the Terry stop that cops misuse all over the country. It was the Warren Court in the 60s that did all this crap that's causing us problems now. But we can, through Congress, get rid of qualified immunity because the Supreme Court wasn't supposed to do that in the first place. But I think the bigger issue is just the lack of accountability. But we can get rid of qualified immunity, but that's still not going to fix the problem, because just making the individual officers liable at any cost is not going to fix the problem, because if there's no insurance company involved, then lawyers aren't going to go after it. They're just not. Because you got to have some pot at the end of the rainbow to chase after, or else you can't finance the case. So you want to hold the agency responsible. So it's a complex issue, but the officers are always responsible anyways. What we could do by legislation is fix the problem of not being able to sue the agency, because that's the problem we have now. If Officer Friendly in one of our videos calls us a you-know-what sucker several times, violates our Fourth Amendment rights, we have to sue Officer Friendly. We can rarely sue the Putnam County Sheriff's Department or Putnam County itself. We can rarely do that. Only in specific circumstances where we can prove the rare case of a pattern or actual policy or regulation of constitutional violations. But just the fact that Officer Friendly screwed us over, they're not going to be liable for that under existing law. That is what we need to fix. I mean, that's bigger than qualified immunity for the officer. Putnam County's not entitled to qualified immunity because they're not an individual. They're a political subdivision. Fine. You want to give Officer Friendly qualified immunity? Open up the lawsuits to the county. That is going to fix a problem. Then they're going to get rid of Officer Friendly. And if there's something in place, where Officer Friendly and his union have made it where you can't get rid of them for anything, then we get rid of that. That is how we fix the problem. All the racial stuff, you're not going to fix that problem. Of course, that's not going away anyway. So where are we? We're about halfway through 2020 there. And I addressed that in a few different videos. Had a few other shenanigans and some videos about old guns. And then I did a video about qualified immunity and how it was a confusing failure. A lot of people have asked me to make a video about qualified immunity, so that's what I did. So if you're interested in qualified immunity, if you're one of these First Amendment proponents or auditors and you make First Amendment videos, you're interested in qualified immunity, I got a video that's a lot better than the 5-minute video that was available elsewhere. I go all through it. And take a look at that video. It's on, again, all the aspects of qualified immunity, everything you need to know about qualified immunity, because it's probably the most misunderstood concept in civil rights law. And I go all through it for 30 minutes. I think I've even made another one after this. So that's qualified immunity. And what's really the next thing that happened here? I did some more videos on the new mask mandate when it came out here in West Virginia, and an update on the lawsuit that we had filed before the Supreme Court. And that's really when I started doing the live videos, and I was introduced to this StreamYard, which is what I use, and I've liked it a lot. Obviously, my internet connection has been pretty crappy, and that's another civil rights issue that has emerged in 2020, is that our kids are forced to stay home from school, and even worse, we're forced to stay home from work, and we're demanded to and requested to work from home off the internet, but we don't have adequate internet connections. Now that's something that the government could do, similar to building roads, my internet. You need to get off your ass if you're in government and fix our internet. That's what you can do in response to COVID-19. That government should do. Fix our internet, and we'll pay for it, but put the infrastructure in place. All right. So the governor the governor was getting worse and worse. So I did a bunch of videos on our governor's tyranny. He had threatened a travel ban. So I did a video on a travel ban. And what do you know? After I did that, he backs off and said, "Oh, don't listen to what people are saying. I'm not going to do a travel ban." But he did threaten to do it. So this is sort of like I'm looking in a mirror, mirror inside a mirror. And here I am talking about the travel ban.
I mean,
so I don't remember where we are here. This is a little more than halfway through the year. And I'm discussing why it would be unconstitutional to make a travel ban.
Would be
now,
a
lot of people have asked
violation
me this, what is the right to travel? Well, I'm not going to go all into the right to travel, but here's the difference. The governors, our governor in particular, they can control travel inside our state borders as a part of the declaration of a state of emergency, or that's what they're claiming to be able to do. And the federal constitution doesn't stop them really from doing that in most circumstances. But when you talk about state lines and crossing state lines, that's where the federal constitutional law comes into play. And so if our governor tries to say that we can't cross the state lines, or people from other states, they can't cross through us, that's when it's going to be unconstitutional. That's where a travel ban from crossing in between states is going to be unconstitutional, assuming you had a court, even a federal court, that cared. But black letter of the law, it is unconstitutional. So yeah, there is a federal constitutional right to be able to travel in between states. Absolutely. All right. So we fought for some amount of time against the governor. Eventually ended up losing that case. Eventually ended up also taking the Walker case up to the Fourth Circuit, and did a few videos on that. Did some videos on where is the state of emergency that in the Constitution. Of course, it's not in there. Then what happened? Well, the next big thing that happened was the Rittenhouse case. And that was, from a civil rights perspective, that was pretty interesting. How that's played out. So I did a video on Rittenhouse, sort of
that Wisconsin.
Where is it? My analysis on all the YouTube lawyers, of course, were doing analysis videos on Rittenhouse. And so since I'm interested in both guns and
self-defense,
criminal defense and civil rights lawsuits,
AR-15
I did my own video
I'm not
on
sure
that.
where it cut off, but
what my thoughts were on what happened.
He was supposed,
and it's just another example of how scary things have gotten in 2020.
Let's see. You're saying Illinois, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or more importantly, and more specifically, the right to life, the right of self-defense, the right to defend yourself. It may be a new normal here in 2020, but we build courthouses for a reason, to sort out the facts of what happened and to apply the law. The difficult part here is going to ensure that there's a fair trial to come out of these shootings that occurred. And this is sort of like what we've been talking about in the Michael Walker case. And in that case here in West Virginia, the judge actually ruled that AR-15 style rifles are not used in self-defense situations generally. And here we can see a incident where that. Also, yes, I've got more than one of these hats. I have them in all different styles. If that was your question. All right, so the Rittenhouse, I did a bunch of videos on the Rittenhouse, and there's only so much you can say. There's only so much you can say on the Rittenhouse stuff. I mean, it's interesting to see where it's ended up after all this time. And when was that? Back in
Heck, I made that video back in that's 4 months ago now. So in the past 4 months, what's happened? Well, he finally got bonded out of jail. What was it? One of the famous Ricky something, one of the 80s TV stars, had helped bond him out of jail. So he's gotten out of jail, but he's still facing this awful criminal trial that is highly politicized. And the prosecutors have started to come after him even before the smoke had cleared, basically. And we know that it's for political reasons. But the fact is that everybody should be entitled to a fair trial. And they should not be prosecuted on social media, in the news media, in the newspaper media, like these prosecutors in Wisconsin have done. And they should be ashamed of themselves. And I hope that his lawyer, who seems to have somewhat gone off the rails here in the past few days, I hope that he knows what he's doing and he has a plan. Because this kid should not be, used as a. I'm not saying that he's doing this, but just in general, you shouldn't use somebody as a pawn on social media for attention. This kid needs a real in the trenches lawyer who's prepared to fight to the death, metaphorically speaking, in that courtroom in Wisconsin. That's what he needs. He needs a trial lawyer, and he needs, it could be somebody nationally famous, but he needs somebody who knows that particular system in Wisconsin. And I hope he's getting what he needs. I do feel for the kid. But if you're interested in the extended version of my analysis, I've got a couple of videos on it. And then we had a lot of these freedom of speech issues popping up. And I'm going to have to speed this up because we know it's New Year's Eve and I've got to start drinking. So we have these freedom of speech issues, and I didn't know how bad it was going to get. There you don't see it yet. Hang on. Add it to stream. All right. So there you have Helga. That's my dog in my union office, watching to see what the hell's happening outside the office. She's obsessed with that. So freedom of speech on issues of the day without being punished by the government for doing so is really the foundation of our republic. Hang on a second. I've just glanced at the comments, and Michelle, you asked, why did you say his attorney is off the rails in the last few days? I'll answer that before I move to a different topic. The reason I said that is because I don't know if he was on Twitter, and I haven't been paying real close attention to what he's doing, but he's making all sorts of allegations against Justice John Roberts and pedophilia, and now he's saying Epstein's still alive. Now, maybe these things are true. I don't know. If they are true, do I think that attorney is the only person that holds that information and nobody else has leaked it? I find it highly unlikely, and maybe there's a rhyme to his reason. I don't know, but I'm just saying, in regards to this poor kid, I hope that there's somebody working on his case and using something other than Epstein-related defenses. That's all I'm saying. He seems to have been going somewhat off the rails, and while he's been doing a lot of seemingly patriotic stuff, I've seen there was a Breitbart article out about, he had a history of donating to Democrats his entire career. So I don't know. I don't care what people say. I care what people do. Let me see him get that kid off. I'll be impressed. Okay, back to this video. But this is exactly what has been happening on social media, as illustrated by this case of Mr. Love, now former state employee in Maryland. In that case, some really intolerant, left-leaning. So I really had no idea how bad this was going to get. This guy in Maryland got fired. Where is it?
Executive branch sort of deals where
he got fired for his stating his political opinions on social media. And the reason I was interested in this is because, well, your private employer can do that. They can fire you generally for any non-skin color reason that they want to, or gender or misgender. The government, the public employees, like I said, it's hard for them to fire you, but they can't retaliate against your First Amendment speech. Not usually, anyways. There are exceptions, and this guy had been fired for something he had posted or forwarded on social media. All sorts of outreach things to the community. I don't know exactly what they did. Hey, that's a good question, thought to make people think. Now, if this is, I think if this these are he was forwarding some Rittenhouse stuff too. Ago. So here we have Delegate Eric. I don't know how you pronounce his name. He must be fired immediately. So you have yet another state legislator there urging the governor to fire a state employee due to his private Facebook posts having to do with political issues of the last few days, which have been all over the news and have been all over social media. So sure enough, Governor Hogan. All right, so this guy got fired, and it was just a preview of coming attractions about how bad it really was going to get. So there's an entire industry now of Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and a lot of these left-wing groups coming after anybody and everybody that they disagree with. They don't argue with them. They flood their employer with hate mail and threats, and they get them fired. They've been doing it in private places of employment. They've been doing it in public places of employment. But as I pointed out in that video, it's more difficult for them to do it with public employees, because then once a firing takes place, that's action under color of law, which is a necessary component for any civil rights claim, any civil rights lawsuit. Private employer is allowed to violate your civil rights because the Bill of Rights only applies, in theory, to government acting under color of law. Now, through legislation, we've made it, or Congress has made it, and states have made it so that they can't fire you for skin color or gender or age sometimes, but they can fire you for, and private employees I'm talking about, they can fire you for not liking your political opinions. Unfortunately, maybe it's time to change that by legislation. Of course, it's not in the Constitution. So a lot of that's been going on in 2020 is the new era of the suppression of First Amendment speech. Even YouTube, has said, they've threatened that they're going to take down any videos that they disagree with regarding, the election results or fraud in the 2020 election. And that's just a scary slope to start down. And they haven't taken, I've done plenty of videos on that, and they haven't taken any of mine down. So hopefully that really didn't happen. Oh, let me fast forward here. Here we go. So we filed the lawsuit on behalf of the restaurant in Putnam County in federal court to challenge the mask mandate and the stay-at-home order. And here's the first big video I did on that. And even though we've had worse pandemics in the past, it's not something that is a part of American tradition or American legal history. And frankly, it's quite scary that the government was able to lock down or, quote, close our economy this quickly and with so much compliance by some sort of some of the background. So this is my client was a restaurant in Putnam County, West Virginia, and they got drugged through the news and on social media for making a Facebook post expressing that they didn't believe that they could or would force anybody to wear a mask, whether employees or customers, but that they were going to abide by all the social distancing and other guidelines. And they just got absolutely smeared for it, and they got inspected twice by the local county health inspector and threatened with closure by the next day if they didn't force everybody to wear masks. So we filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. It's still ongoing, and there's a really flattering news interview I did. He and his wife, Ashley, who FaceTime, is also sure. So there's the restaurant there. And to make a long story short, we went to court, federal court in Huntington, West Virginia, on that. And so far, we've lost, and it's not over yet, though. But it's not looking good in federal court. The federal courts aren't wanting to touch these gubernatorial state of emergency mandates that are coming out. So that's why we're going back to state court. But it is still pending. The governor had filed a motion to dismiss. We responded to it, and he basically just called us peasants who should be ashamed of ourselves for wasting their royal time. And we'll see what the court ultimately decides in that case. So that's still pending. Anything else here? All right, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that happened this year. You remember there was this discussion about whether or not Ruth Bader Ginsburg should be replaced. So I did a little bit of research, and I did a video on it, on whether she should be replaced, looking at the law and our history of how we've done things in the past. And the conclusion is yes, obviously she should be replaced.
And if he's not in the first two.
All right. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, another interesting thing that happened this year. What didn't happen this year? The year of the Karen. I've said this many times. 2020 has been the year of the Karen. Absolutely crazy. And so here's a Karen caught on video, which I'll bring your attention to. This is worthy of the end of the year award, Karen Awards, basically. You remember this.
You guys! I'm driving your car, but I just got a notification that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died! Could this year get any worse? Ruth! You just had to make it to 2021!
Nah, there you go. Year of the Karen, because freedom is scary. All right, what else happened here before I wrap things up? We had, you name it, packing the court. Remember, they're making allegations of packing the court. We got into prosecutors. And I think we brought a lot of attention to this year, the fact that a lot, prosecutors are elected all around the country, and George Soros has been getting prosecutors elected, which brings up another thing that happened. The McCloskeys, remember them in Missouri? The lawyer who maybe I have a picture still of them up here. The lawyer and his wife in front of their big house that ended up, I don't think I have any pictures left, but they ended up getting charged criminally. Well, who was the prosecutor who charged them with criminally for just trying to keep rioters or potential rioters out of their home? Well, it was a George Soros elected prosecutor. And if you watch my video I did on prosecutors, actually I did a couple of them. One of which is, Kamala Harris. If we're really worried about systematic racism and putting, young black men in prison at an exponential, at a discriminatory rate, I guess I should say, let's look at the prosecutors. She was a prosecutor her entire career. That's what she did, is put young black men in prison. So why are we electing her as vice president and probably president now? I don't know. You know why? Because the news media suppresses the truth, and all they do is propaganda. So yeah, I did a few more videos on search and seizure law, excessive force law, another how to handle a traffic stop, about warrants, qualified immunity. But here's the next interesting video of one of our cases that popped up. This is the police boot stomp case. Hi, I'm West Virginia civil rights lawyer John Bryant, and this video is about a client of mine named Matt. In March of 2019, he was hanging out at his house, minding his own business. I'll fast forward here. This is the video.
Yo. Come on. I haven't done anything. I don't know what's going on. Huh? Shut the fuck up. Throw out. Hands and knees. Come on. I haven't done anything. Is anybody else in here? No, sir. Okay, well, come on out. I don't know what's going on. I don't. What'd I do?
We'll let you know in just a second.
Yes, sir.
Don't fucking listen.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. I
Get the
didn't
fuck out
mean.
of the goddamn house. You get the fuck out of the house.
I'm sorry. I didn't understand.
Nobody else in here?
No, sir. I'm sorry. I don't know what I've done. Oh, my head. Oh, oh, my head.
All right, so that's the boot stomp case, and that lawsuit was filed, it was served, and the defense lawyers have already picked up on and filed their answer on the other side. So that's about the point in the process that we're at right now. And so we're entering into the discovery stage next, and that should be fun. Apparently, Officer Boot Stomp, I think, has quite, from what I'm gathering so far, quite a history of allegations in the past. We'll see. I'm sure I'll be doing update videos on that in the future. But 2020 wouldn't close out just yet. There were other police videos to be had and to be posted on YouTube. See which one was next. Okay, we had this video, which actually didn't happen this year. It was an older case, but
I am John Bryan, West Virginia civil rights lawyer.
Put the footage up.
Is en route to the residence that the
and
this
is an instructive case,
and you can see what happens here.
It shows my client being shot through the front door of his own home. But that's not really the most instructive part of it. And you can watch that video if you want to watch it. But here's the important part that I really wanted to discuss. This is after the shooting. You know, there's always the issue of, well, you know, if you're involved in a self-defense shooting, which police officer shootings, they're a self-defense analysis, just like a civilian one. It's basically the same analysis of whether you have a reasonable belief that you or someone else's life is in danger or in danger of great bodily harm. Same thing. But so there's the question of whether you talk to the police or whether you ask for a lawyer or what do you do? But here's what cops do, you know, as caught on audio. So this is a dash
still
cam.
Has his dash,
and with a dash cam, at least at this time, you still had the audio recording off the police officer's person. So you can't see, but you can still hear. And so you hear a state trooper come up to the officer who was the shooter and says, "Hey, well, I'm going to be investigating this, but basically shut up and quit running your mouth about what happened." So obviously, not really investigating it to see what happened.
Dash cam recorder on his person, so it's still recording all the audio. You're about to hear the West Virginia state trooper who was assigned to investigate this police shooting come up and talk to this officer for the first time. He tells the exact same story for the third time.
And it was muffled, and it was either, I know I heard shoot, and it was either shoot him or shoot me. But I heard it twice, and that's when I shot. But I don't know who said it, because it was muffled. Just get it all together. I'm going to be starting to work the thing, so Scott gets up there, we might get the guy from Martinsburg, and I know everybody, but like I was telling Ben, some of the stuff I've read before, I don't know if it's a good thing for somebody when they've been involved in a shooting to make a statement right away. There's pros and cons.
Yeah, some of the things I've heard in my career as a police officer tells me that I don't know if it's a good thing for, police, someone who's just shot somebody to make a statement right away. You really should go home and sleep on it a few days. And indeed, that's what happened in this case. And I didn't play the part, but you can watch the video. Earlier in this video, he describes to the sheriff who arrives, he's a deputy, what happened. So-and-so was running up behind me and said, shoot. So I shot, which obviously that's a problem. I mean, that's not a self-defense case right there. That's I don't know what that is. And so he tells that story again to the state trooper who comes up and says, I'm investigating it. And he's trying to tell his story. His emotions are high, his tensions are high, and he's wanting to tell exactly what happened. And so basically this troopers is saying, look, I'm the one investigating this. For I think, everything I know, you basically shut the hell up, go home. And sure enough, he did. They turned off. He said, well, are you still recording? And then he said, yeah. And then click, he turns off. And then what do you have? A written statement several days later that is completely different. It's not, I was running up and Tony was yelling, shoot, so I shot. It was, I saw a gun, I shot. And obviously, that is different than what he said here at the scene. So you can see, if you ever wondered whether or not you should keep your mouth shut after a self-defense shooting or any shooting, according to the West Virginia State Police, you should. And that's an officer who's investigating a shooting. You should keep your mouth shut, sleep on it for a couple of days, then talk to your lawyers and make a statement in writing. That's what they do, so it should be good enough for all of us. So that's an interesting video. That case ended up being litigated right up onto the eve of trial, the courthouse steps, so to speak, and ended up being settled. All right, we're getting pretty closer to the end of the year now, but it's hard to believe that there's still more. I can't go through all of them, but this is an interesting one. If you haven't seen this video, this is the tale of the two or three beatings on the same video camera. And these are older cases I've litigated that I was able to track down the video. This is the view originally through the surveillance camera at issue here. This is the detention center in Wood County, West Virginia. That's Parkersburg. And there comes my client, Brian Sawyer. He's brought in by the Wood County deputies following his arrest after a domestic disturbance call. And you can see that there's a conversation now. All right, I'll fast forward this. Uncan't activated. They later got places to be, and that has and the discussion. All right, so here's the between the important moment in this video. My client's sitting there. Again, you can't hear what's being said. They're arguing back and forth. You can't hear what they're saying, but he's got his arms crossed, and
you can take that badge and you can shove it
standing over him. They had unhandcuffed him
immediately after that,
and he's got his arms crossed. He knows what was
so I'll slow
what's
this
coming,
down.
and then
You see he taps.
they're
the
arguing,
badge.
and then he
the
then
badge,
crosses his
and then
arms, and he's making
he
a
grabs
gesture,
the
and
client
then
by the
boom,
neck with his
we
right.
have the use of
arm.
force,
The
which
other
takes
deputies are
place.
still
In the end, we
watching.
ended up taking this
Not
to
too
jury
concerned
trial
yet.
and ended up losing at jury trial, and which was a surprise. In fact, it surprised the federal judge, and the federal judge threw out the jury verdict and awarded the verdict in our favor, and ordered another trial to be held just on the issue of how much my client was supposed to be paid. Well, the defense didn't like that at all, and they appealed that all the way to the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, where we won handily there as well. And so then there was another case. You'll see by well, I shouldn't say the same camera necessarily. It might have been the new and improved camera in the same place. Where is it?
Same guy.
This is lightning. You want some of this? And then look. All right. So, here we go. This is the important part in this video. This is this young cop right here. His family had been involved with that police department for generations. He hadn't had any disciplinary problems before, really no allegations that I know of. But he lost his, they had a drunk guy that they had arrested for public intox, and he was running his mouth, and he just kind of lost his cool. And here's what he does.
Boom. He throws a haymaker and just drops him
like a wet noodle.
Like a wet noodle.
And now they had a problem.
All of a
He's
sudden,
unconscious. So an ambulance had to come. They pulled the video. He got indicted, lost his job. We ended up filing a lawsuit. The insurance company tried to throw him under the bus. So I ended up helping to get him insurance coverage to get my client paid. We settled that case. Here's another one.
Engaging in a pretty violent processing for an arrestee. Now, the one
another six-figure settlement out of this one.
Bystander.
I don't know if it's at the same building. It's definitely a different camera.
You can't watch an excessive force fire.
Tale of the two cases. So I spent a lot of time in that county, Wood County, Parkersburg, West Virginia. Spent several years there litigating those cases. So that's an interesting video if you haven't seen that one. All right. As we get towards the end of the year, I did a lot of videos against the governor. And speaking of the governor, he had this guy arrested who became my client for posting a meme on Twitter. So you might want to check out the video on that. I'll put that up here. And skip ads.
By members of the state police executive. They said a man in West Virginia.
All right, where's the meme? Here it is.
The citizens of
All
West
right, there's the
Virginia.
meme
And it has,
that the
of course,
guy,
West
he didn't even
Virginia
create it.
governor's
He just
official
shared it.
portrait on the wanted poster.
And then he added some words. It could have been worded differently, but does it make him a terrorist? No, but they charged him with the felony terroristic threats statute, which was passed in many states, including our state, after 9/11 to get terrorists. But they've never used it to get terrorists. They just use it to get people they could charge for something else. But it's a more serious charge, terroristic threats, and a serious felony. So here's what the governor did:
He
got
didn't
rid
create
of
this. He just
a
shared it. But
political
he added
critic
some
on
text
social media,
which
and that case is still
may
pending.
not have state troopers.
That case
They're
is still
without the
pending. This
intent
is
to commit
before
the
we
act,
actually
is
went to
guilty of
court
a
on it.
felony.
But that's the
Upon
statute,
conviction thereof, safety
and here's the
security of government.
allegations against them.
So on the same day, this officer was
So then somewhere there, I did a video after we got back from court with an update on what happened. Where is it? It's up here somewhere. Oh, here we go. I think it was this one.
But in case you see that on the news,
Yeah,
I
Little
don't know
John
what
went
clips
with
they're gonna
me.
use.
There we are. There we are in the truck.
Amendment, the right to engage in protected political speech. You know, remember that you also can celebrate the Fifth Amendment. So if the police come knocking on your door and they're not there to collect money for their union, they're probably there to collect evidence to use to put you in jail. But my client had nothing to hide. I mean, he talked to them. They asked him, you know, if about the tweet. He explained to them that he wasn't being literal. It was First Amendment speech, and he used those words. It was hyperbole. It was metaphorical. It was satire. I mean, obviously, it wasn't a real Wild West wanted poster. He wasn't advocating for terrorism.
All right. So if you watch that video, you understand what happened. That case is still pending. They charged this guy with a felony for just sharing this tweet, and it's an absolutely disgrace. It's an abuse of power, and people have been up in arms about it and offering to help in the fight. And I took it to court, and the TV news was there. You know, you did a good job in court when the TV news camera is filming the whole thing, the whole hearing, because in state court, the cameras can come in. Federal court, no cameras. You can have an artist paint you, that's it. But we had TV news cameras in the courtroom, and I questioned the cop who arrested him at length, as much as they would let me, and they didn't let me do a whole lot. But you know you did a good job when you're a criminal defense lawyer when the news doesn't show any of it. They film the whole damn thing, and they show none of it. Why? Because it is the voice of reason. It points out the obvious fact that no crime was committed, that a tyrannical governor is trying to take down a political critic who is a nobody, low-hanging fruit, just is a worker bee, has no money to defend himself, has no big political friends. That's the story there. And so that's why they didn't show any of that hearing, because it wasn't the sensational news headlines about somebody threatening the governor. You know you did a good job when the TV news shows none of it. And that's what happened in this particular case. And I got a call shortly after that by the guy who tried to primary our governor, Michael Folk. And then I remembered what had happened to him. He told me the story about what had happened to him, and he had done something very similar where he had criticized Hillary in much the same way. It was very, very similar. I think maybe there was a wanted poster or something, said that there was, treason and we should go through that process. And people were trying to get the Secret Service to come down on him, and I don't remember if he got a call from the Secret Service, but this had to do with Hillary, and he didn't he didn't turn up suicided anywhere. He survived the whole ordeal, and was he charged with being a terrorist for doing the same exact thing? No. Why? Why wasn't the guy who ran against our governor in the Republican primary? Why wasn't he charged with terroristic threats for doing the exact same thing? He was drugged through the TV news like this guy and on social media. But I mean, the woke crowd came after him, but nobody, there were no criminal charges against him. He wasn't charged with a felony. Well, why? Because he could have defended himself. That's why. Because he was already a political candidate for public office. And there would have been a spotlight on what happened. And it was in the national news when he made that statement, when people were calling for the Secret Service to do something for him. But when my client, just some guy, just some regular guy, what happens? The state police, or as the public defender who was sitting in the back of the room, he called them the goon squad. And that's exactly right. The goon squad showed up at this poor guy's house and scared the absolutely living hell out of him, to the point to where he's, I'm very sorry, I'll delete it. And he did delete it. And then they came back with a warrant and said, here you go. You're charged with a felony. And that's what happened in that case. So yeah, that case, that makes my blood boil. And it's hard to believe, looking at all these things in a row, that all of this has either happened or been discussed here in 2020. It just seems like it's been longer than that. And when is it going to end? All right. Then we had the ATF brace stuff, and they backed down. The other thing that happened, and running out of time here, but the governor of West Virginia had threatened to start arresting people for violation of the mandate. And then I think on social media and YouTube, me and others, said we were going to fight that. And the governor backed down. And it again goes to the power of, when I say YouTube, I don't mean YouTube specifically, because Google owns YouTube and they can censor me anytime they want. They can censor anybody else anytime they want. But it's just the power of shining the light on your government when they do these sorts of things. In years past, it wasn't as easy. And now the most effective way of dealing with these situations is not only filing these civil lawsuits, but putting it out there for anyone and everyone to see, because our police agencies aren't holding each other accountable. There's no way to search to see if a particular officer had done this before, or been alleged to have committed excessive force before, or committed these unconstitutional searches and seizures. There's no database for this. So what else can you do but Google it, go on YouTube, see if there's any videos out there. And in fact, when I worked at the Department of Justice, how do you think most of the investigations were done? If you're investigating police misconduct or pattern or practice police misconduct around the entire country, what is the most efficient and best way? I mean, you get phone calls coming in every day. You get letters, a lot of jail inmate letters, and those were all read. Somebody was tasked with answering the phones every day. But what's the best way? Is you Google it. You Google it. And you'll see news stories come up, social media come up, YouTube videos come up. And then when you find a cluster of them, you look into it further. You contact maybe the local U.S. Attorney's office, or you go there for further investigation, or you have the FBI go in there. That's where it starts. If you put an officer's name in and it's not coming up on Google or some other search engine or on YouTube, no one's going to know about it. But if you do, just like the judicial folks knew about this judge one day after the YouTube video, that's how the U.S. Department of Justice, believe it or not, a lot of times finds out about these civil rights violations. And when there's a bunch of them, sometimes they'll start a pattern of practice civil rights investigation just based on that. So it's very important to be able to search these things on the internet. So 2020 has been, as I've said many times, it's just the year of the Karen. I mean, we've had these civil rights issues, the police issues going on for a long time now, but this is now the new issue that we've had to deal with is this crazy reality of the fact that we're having to wear these masks on our face or else get arrested. The crazy reality that we're having our businesses closed by our governor, even over objections or non-action of our legislatures. It's the crazy reality that we actually have no rights. We really don't. It doesn't really matter what the Constitution or the Bill of Rights says if it's not enforced by the judicial system, because we have 3 branches of government. We only work where all 3 are doing their job. Where the legislative branch is sitting back and sitting on their asses and doing nothing. We don't have to depend on them to stop the crazy governors or stop an out of control president. We don't have to depend on the legislatures if the judicial branch is doing their job. But what happens if both the legislature and the judicial branch is scared to take any action? Then there's no stopping a governor or even a president in the future from doing whatever they want to trample all over our rights. So we're going to have to take it upon ourselves as just the public to share information and put the law out there and put these videos out there and put the facts out there so that we stay informed and we work together to try to force our government to do their job. And it's important for people like some of my clients to step up and agree to be the plaintiffs in some of these civil rights cases to get these before the courts, because the courts can't just act on their own. There has to be a case or controversy before them. So somebody has to have the guts to put their name on the lawsuit, on the petition, to go before the courts, to win or to lose. So that's been 2020. It's been an absolute crazy year. But as I said as I wrote on the very first background off of this, the background page, lawyers thrive on chaos. People have always told me that. Lawyers thrive on chaos. I didn't know quite what was going to happen when the economy shut down and the governors shut everybody down. Is it going to hurt all the lawyers? And you know what? If you look at all the COVID PPP loans, all these ambulance chasers, all these lawyers, look how many millions of dollars they got out of the PPP loans, just like our governor with what, 17 or $20 million he took, creates the emergency, then also takes millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money because of the emergency he created. Well, you have all of these lawyers, these ambulance chasers, they took out millions and millions of dollars. Search it. This is all publicly searchable. Millions of dollars. And I didn't get $1. I didn't ask for $1. I didn't ask for $1. In fact, I've never been busier in my life. And that's good for me, but it's bad for society because I thrive off of chaos. The busier I am, the more chaos is happening out there. And there's so much chaos happening out there that I could work 24 hours a day if I could stay awake. I have to force myself to take time off. As you know, if you watch my video on Christmas Eve, I was still here. And here it is New Year's Eve and I'm still here. So I'm going to have to cut it short now. And I'm sorry I didn't get to any comments, but this was sort of an unplanned, wrap up the year. Since I've spent the year as my night job as a YouTube lawyer, when I wasn't acting as a real lawyer, I feel it necessary that I had to do a year in review video, a wrap up video that kind of showed some of the highlights / lowlights of the year. So please continue to follow, what I'm doing here. And, the funny thing is if I could just make YouTube videos, I could produce them very well. I could make a whole lot more of them. But that's just, it is basically I don't want to say it's a hobby because look how important some of them have been. I mean, they've achieved real results. And I think that's an important part of the process that I've realized just this year is educating the public and shining a light on everything that's happening, in addition to litigating these cases actually in court. So it's been a wild ride, and I thank you for following along. If you have been, and if you haven't been, please start to follow along, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page, or if you're on Facebook, you can also subscribe and select the little bell thingy for notifications so that you find out when we go live, because it's not really, a lot of times on Monday night I like to do it, but it depends on what I have going on, because my number one priority is the cases I have with real deadlines that I actually have to litigate. So thanks for watching, and just remember to explain to all the Karens that you meet that freedom is scary. Freedom is scary, but your rights do not end where their fear begins. Remember that your rights don't end where their fear begins. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether they're scared. Let's look at what the Constitution says, what the Bill of Rights says. So we have to allow things that would scare Karen, things that would scare Karen's husband. I forget what we call him. But that's the point of this whole thing. So thank you for watching. And until next time, I'm John Bryan, West Virginia civil rights lawyer.